What up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Black Top Podcast. As you can see, Rio is back. The boys are back in town. But yeah, first of all, if you're watching, subscribe, give the pod a review, 5 stars, all of that kind of stuff. But, boys, how we feeling?
Feeling amazing, man. I mean, sorry, by the way, if you guys haven't noticed, my voice is basically gone because I spent the whole weekend in Seattle winning a basketball tournament, so I'm good right now. But apologies to the raspiness if people are triggered. Guess what? I don't give a damn. But yeah, apologies ahead of time because
Hey,
I
it's
sound
okay.
actually sound I sound like ass right now.
No worries. Ruben, bro, congrats. I saw you take the Kobe photo. That was respects in the Crocs.
Had to, bro. Had to get the fire pick for the gram. You know what I'm saying?
And then Christian, for you, buddy.
I'm supple, doing just fine. Yep.
Very nice work. So, y'all are not aware what's been going on. There's been like upwards of $2 billion plus thrown around these past few days at the start of free agency, and we're here to talk about it. Not only that, there's also like obviously some key trades that have happened last week. Like it was, I think, right before we started the recording, or like slightly a bit before, but that was when the DeJounte Murray trade happened, and as much as that was it in itself, like such a big polarizing and sort of needle pushing kind of move. Not the only one we're going to talk about. It's not the only one that's happened, and there's still more to come. But when it comes to free agency, as much as, talking about the trades is all cool and that, we're here to talk about the money. I think it would be hard pressed to find another sports sort of off season free agency time, or whether it's like the transfer window for like football or soccer, whichever word you want to use. I think the NBA's off season is one of the more exciting ones, especially we got the two Titans, the LA and the Celtics in the 80s kind of thing with Shams and Woj, and yeah, so rather than kind of rifling off verbatim, what do you guys think of this person and their signing thing, we're gonna talk about our favorite signings, some guys we think are steals, and potentially some overpays because you know who's off the top of my head, Nicholas Batum is probably one of the, not necessarily the earliest, but in regards to like kind of in the past 5 to 10 years, if you think of players who, not saying they didn't deserve the contract, but when you look at how they performed when they signed their name there, it didn't turn out so well. So let's talk about that. First of all, though, what were your guys' favorite signings?
I
You can
think
like
for
rifle off a
me,
bunch if you want.
yeah, so I got a few. I mean, off the top of my head, Gary Payton to Portland is an awesome one. Just considering how Portland has been wanting to go the defensive route, right? And we knew that Golden State wasn't going to be able to pay the dude. And I think if you're looking from a backcourt perspective, especially, you're in your backcourt, you got to be able to have someone who can defend at the top of the key, be the head of the snake defensively. For me, I think Gary Payton does exactly that for you as a team, and he's also solid offensively. And I think this is a situation where he can, where he has a little bit of freedom to test and experiment what he can do in the offensive end, as opposed to playing a very strictly defensive role. Um, so I think I think the money that he got is obviously really good for him, but also, in terms of what he provides to a winning club, I thought his was a really good signing. I have to say, I really liked Lonnie Walker going to LA. I think that was such an underrated deal, and also I'm going to add on to that. Thomas Bryant signed like a 1 year deal with the Lakers just earlier today.
Oh,
Um,
really? I didn't see that.
yes, he did. I saw that. That was earlier this. I want to say early evening or late evening. But yeah, he signed a 1 year deal to try and fight for a winning starting spot. And listen, if he can come back to any level close to what he was doing before he got injured, that's a huge, big, that's a huge steal, in fact, for the Lakers. So, there's a number of other deals that I really like here. The I like the fact that Zach Levine went back to Chicago. I think it made the most sense for him. And the other deal I really liked is Kyle Anderson. Right, I thought he was one of my targets for the Raptors, and he signed a 2 year, $18 million deal. If I'm not mistaken. So 9 million, a piece for a year. I think that's a great signing. And Tyus Jones also going back to Memphis because he was also on my target list. He was one of the underrated guards last year. But yeah, those are some of the ones I'd rifle off. There's a bunch more that I can say, but they're mostly Raptors related, so I'll save that for a later segment when we talk about our teams.
All solid. And who do you have?
I have a list here. I'll maybe talk on the people that are for my quote unquote team. Um, I mean, DeJounte Murray to the Hawks for me. I mean, that one is pretty big for most people, but I think it's nice to see how like two of the most premier and up and coming guards will like pair together. Um, I feel like they're kind of a contrast duo in the backcourt too, which is I think a recipe for success. And I mean, even with the given Atlanta Hawks roster right now, I think a huge move. Um, I thought I have just some fun ones that I thought were like in my head like really good moves. Bruce Brown to the Nuggets being one of them. I think he's gonna definitely like kind of get more of a light on the Nuggets roster, in my opinion. Now that I mean, I'm pretty sure Will Barton went to I believe the Wizards, so he will probably fill in that position relatively well, and um, I assume with Jamal Murray still kind of. I assume. Oh, I don't think he's actually slated to play right away, um, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a very good possibility Bruce Brown might even slot into a starting position, which is really awesome. I thought PJ Tucker to Philly was a really good move for Philly. I think it really doesn't necessarily solve all their problems, but really adds a defensive presence that I think is crucially needed. John Wall to the Clippers. I think it's just a fun trade that I don't know what's really going to happen with it, but I've been a fan of John Wall for a long time. Uh, and then I think the last one for the meantime is DiVincenzo to the Warriors. Um, I think the Warriors are like maybe not famously or infamously known, but just um, known to really develop players who I think people kind of sleep on, or players that people forget about once they've kind of hit a certain toe in their career or kind of moment in their career, like Andrew Wiggins, Otto Porter Jr., Gary Payton. All those players in the last couple of years have all pretty much rebirthed their NBA career through the Warriors, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see DiVincenzo looking like kind of a prime version of himself, and kind of like when he was playing for the Bucks. Um, so I'm excited for that for the Warriors. Yeah, those are mine.
For me, I think first one I'll kind of I guess add on to is I think the Dante DiVincenzo deal is one of probably the best signings. 2 years at the mid-level exception for one of the premier like perimeter guards in the league, in my opinion, when he's healthy, and if he can kind of get back to that pre-injury, looking pretty nice, I will say. I mean, when you look at like what Dante's able to do, he's able to guard like both guards, able to even like operate as a ball handler at some points. And I think it's really their Gary Payton placement. Now, obviously, Dante doesn't have the athleticism and the ability to guard kind of bigger guards that GP does, but again, the fact that I think Dante was one of the premier kind of not necessarily creme de la creme, but right below that in regards to like being able to be a defender at the guard position. So I think that's going to be nice. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Warriors player development goes onwards, considering that Barbosa just signed on to be an assistant for Mike Brown, I think, for Sacramento. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm not saying like it's gonna be like the plateauing of all that stuff, but it's gonna be interesting to see that what happens with that. Another of my favorite signings is Dale McGee, 3 years, $20 million. I mean, he's what, 35, 36? Man, salute to his agent for first of all securing that bag. But I think what it does for the Mavericks is that one, it gives them somewhat of a legit center. Personally, I don't know if I'm hinging all my bets on him being the starting center for a team that's in contention, wants to contend, and is ultimately kind of started to peek into their championship window in a sense where, obviously they had this stellar run. Obviously they want to repeat that. I think JaVale McGee is a good step towards that, but I do like him more as like a more of a backup slash like he's like the UD, but he's able to play consistently kind of thing. So, you know, I hope that's not the end of the Mavericks looking at big men, but still a stellar signing. The other one, because I did have Gary Payton here too, because I mean, Ruben and I both kind of called. I knew the man was gonna get a bag based off like the season he had, but the other person I have, the one I'll finish off with is Malik Monk. 2 years, $19 million. A solid payday. I mean, all of these contracts, whether it's like Bettman or the max of the max, are all nice paydays in the grand scheme of things. But I think 2 years, $19 million is almost the perfect deal for Malik Monk in a sense because you saw him took this flyer with the Lakers last year, had a career year, and didn't necessarily translate into like a long term deal, which I feel like it was definitely on the table, but it wasn't necessarily the money he saw himself being worth. Now, what is that number? I wouldn't know, but I think 2 years, $19 million, that averages out to about nine and a 9.75 or whatever. But he's gonna have the opportunity to be a bucket on this team. Malik Monk's calling card has always been that 3 pointer. And when you look at the two stars, the two kind of backbones of the Kings team, they lack that very much so. So, you know, Malik Monk, I love him as sort of the 6 man option, which if I'm looking at how the team is kind of trending towards now with the addition of Kevin Herter, I think he's going to slot right back into that role, which I think he was most effective when it came to the Lakers last year. So, Malik Monk, 2 years, $19 million. When he comes out of this contract, he's going to be right in the prime of his career, and fingers crossed he etches his way towards a payday. Now, when it comes to steals, I mean, hard to really like. I think that's all subjective at the end of the day. But if you guys had any like steals, who would you say was like? Because I mean, personally, I feel like Ruben mentioned it, but GP2 I think was like 480. That's a really good value for the stuff he's gonna be
Yeah,
able to do. 3 years, $30
yeah.
million dollars. That's role player money, but what Gary Payton brings to you defensively is like damn near like all star, all NBA level defending in my.
I would say right off the bat, Jay Sean Tate re-signing that 3-year deal for 22 million
Mm.
with the Rockets after like having he had such a good year with Houston, even though he had so much inconsistent playing time and also some days where he had inconsistent production. But that was a really good deal. I already mentioned Lonnie Walker was a really great signing. I thought that was like that for me. Even though the market for him was the MLE, I knew for a fact that that was a steal for me because the Lakers are able to get a young guy with a lot of potential for that kind of deal. That solidifies what they're trying to do, and they're trying to turn that roster around a little bit. I do love, obviously barring the health, the Joe Ingles deal for Milwaukee is an awesome one, and I'm sure you would have talked about that in a later segment. But that one was great. I mean, I just have to say this since it's already there. All the Raptors signings were all steals. Thaddeus Young and Chris Boucher were signed at really good numbers. Chris Boucher was one of well, he had worked himself into one of the at the near the top of the class in the free agency pool this year, or at least what analysts were saying, just because of his production and his impact in winning off the bench. And then they signed obviously Otto Porter, who had a lot of suitors, and eventually, ultimately, he chose Toronto because his wife's from there. So, that's crazy. The fact that the Raptors were able to get a really good free agent, another 3-and-D wing. So I really like that. I'll talk more in depth about that later on. But yeah, like the steals I pretty much mentioned were my favorite signings, right? Like the Kyle Andersons, Tyus Jones. Those are all really good numbers. Um, so yeah, it's tough nowadays to be like, okay, that guy's a steal because almost everybody gets overpaid at this point, and I know we'll talk about that also. But I feel like there were some numbers here where I'm like, yeah, that worked out pretty well. Like, there's no doubt, DiVincenzo was a steal for the Warriors. Like that number is awesome for them.
Stellar, stellar. Excited to see him in.
He'll fit right in.
Oh, for
He'll fit right in.
in.
I kind of classified steals with trades as well. I don't know if that was kind of implied, but either way, I'm gonna say it anyways. I think Malcolm Brogdon, the
Yeah,
trade for him
That was robbery.
that was highway
that was
robbery. Like
robbery.
trading what
What
Daniel
the frick?
Tice,
It was
Aaron
a bunch of motherfuckers that don't play.
and a pick
Yeah,
and a few like G League players basically for like a guard that is a former rookie of the year, 50, 40, 90 shooter who is like on the cusp of like almost being an all-star status player, like all for like
Pump the brakes there. I don't know about that. But...
well like I think
Brogdon's the type of player that I think takes this roster to another level.
Oh, for
I
yeah,
sure.
think
like
that's what
For
Christian
sure.
is trying to say.
like he's not like a all-star, like he's not like I would say like going to be like a top contender for an all-star pick, but there is like kind of points in the previous seasons that he like had huge spurts of like being like at that level, you know. uh, and
It's that Milwaukee water, baby. I mean, he's not from there.
You know what? He's in that tier of guards where it's like they never made the All Star team, but you could look at them and be like, okay, this dude is freaking good.
yeah, exactly.
Like, and players in general. Like, there have been players in the past, like CJ McCollum still hasn't made one. Spencer Dinwiddie, the Jalen Brunsons of the world. Like, you can throw Malcolm Brogdon into that list, even though they're not all stars. Like, they are impact players, and that's what Brogdon has been since the first day of his career.
Yeah, agreed. um I think another steal that I mean we'll obviously I think discuss quite in depth maybe in the next section of talking about overpays is the Utah trade, but pretty much what Utah received, I think, was again another highway robbery. I mean, 5 first-round picks and like 3 like exceptionally good role players, and like a top 30 pick. Yeah, I don't for Rudy Gobert of all people too. Like that's what really made it a steal for me. Like I can't even imagine what the Nets are going to trade for Kevin Durant at this point when you see stuff like that. You know?
You said it perfectly right there. I was literally going to add into that. I was like, what the trade was for Rudy Gobert pretty much set the market for what Kevin Durant is,
Yeah,
and more.
Oh, Kevin Durant's gonna go for like 7 first rounders or something crazy
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
like I don't know how you can mortgage your whole future in order to get Rudy Gobert, but the only reason why I think Minnesota did that is because of the fact that their top players are still super young,
yeah. Of course.
like Anthony Edwards, Vanderbilt. Sorry, not Vanderbilt. McDaniels. Was McDaniels traded in that deal? No, he wasn't. Right?
No, but
It was
I
Vanderbilt who was
think
dealt.
let's hold off on this for a bit so that we can really like get into the meat of it once we're at that section. I'm
Oh
excited
yeah,
to
we
talk
are
about
talking
that.
about discussions.
Yeah, for
That's right.
sure.
That's right.
Any other steals, Ken?
I mean, DeJounte Murray, I think was another obvious one for me. I don't understand, what the Spurs are smoking over there to get rid of their. I mean, I'm sure there is, some sort of, reasoning. I'm not questioning that. It's just like the way he played last season was exceptional, and I think like in some ways I would value him not maybe at the class of like Rudy Gobert, but not such a tier below that we'd only offer Danilo Gallinari and three like way future picks just for like one of the best guards coming into the league right now.
I think I read somewhere that they did it because obviously with the way San Antonio's structured now, they're heading towards a bit of a rebuild. I think
Yeah,
it's kind of like let him do what he can do in his prime kind of thing.
yeah, and I understand that. I think it's just more like what they received wasn't necessarily what I think they deserved on their end. So I think it ended up being more of a steal for the Hawks than because they really didn't have to let go of a lot to earn DeJounte Murray. But yeah,
For me, I think the two that kind of jump out to me is one is Isaiah Hartenstein, 2 years, 16 mil. You know, when you look at a guy like Mitchell Robinson, which I don't know if y'all know this, apparently Mitchell Robinson's like the first Knicks rookie to get a second contract from the team, and like
Yeah,
it was an
crazy.
insane like 50 plus years or something. But when you had a guy like Isaiah Hartenstein, we saw this year with the Clippers how, despite the fact it kind of looked like a flyer, we saw how they were able to really be impactful and kind of put the league on notice that once we're healthy, they're kind of screwed. And I think Isaiah Hartenstein was a big part of that because you know he has the ability to be up and down the floor quite like not fast, but at a solid pace. He can like somewhat hit the three. Obviously not like consistently, but when you look at what he was able to do and kind of how versatile and how he was really kind of doing a lot of the dirty work. 2 years, $16 million is a pretty solid. Also with Mitchell Robinson, I mean it's no secret that is like he's very foul happy. He's very much prone to fouling out and stuff like that. He's improved on it, no doubt, but just the fact that that is a concern when looking at what you have as the Knicks. I think adding a guy like Isaiah Hartenstein is very paramount to securing a first round exit. But but Isaiah Hartenstein, solid signing. My last one though, which I think was I don't even know how he got signed for that was Amir Coffey for 3 years,
Yeah,
11 mil.
seven million.
That's
Jesus.
like there are rookies who are going to get paid more than that guy, and what he was able to do this year with like again the whole kind of let's see what happens kind of year that the Clippers had, he was stellar. So much so that I think when it comes to playoff rotation heading into next year, if everybody's healthy, I expect him to be on it. Obviously, though, I feel like he'd be on like the tail end of it, but regardless, I think he'll be able to kind of slot his way, not only just the regular rotation itself, but definitely in the playoff rotation. I mean, 6'7", ability to guard multiple positions, you definitely need that. And yeah, Amir Coffey is just a guy that I think has really paved his way, and I'm very surprised that it's cool for the team, but get your bread, young man. But all right, heading from there, the complete opposite of the steals. Who would you guys think were some of like the overpaid guys?
Oh, Jalen Brunson, easily,
yep,
Sure.
easily.
easily. I mean,
Um,
like, yeah, go on, Ruben, you go on.
no, no, you go ahead. Take it home.
I don't know, man. I just had to pull up this guy's basketball reference because I had to really try and justify like how the fuck this guy got paid like a bag.
It's justified off of 2 games.
Yeah, it's literally justified off of like the time Luca was injured last season and like the playoffs. And I get it. Like he obviously has shown up this season and he's like played exceptionally well, but we have a bunch of players that do that every season. And this is one of those moments where I think a player has like a breakout moment and someone I think overshoots their shot on it. It's very much like um it's very like Nicholas Batum or Chandler Parsons esque. Like it's giving me that vibe. And I think Jalen Brunson for sure is a talented player, but I'm scared that, the Knicks really just threw away a lot of money on this guy. I mean, I'm not scared. I kind of know they did, but that's my
Yeah,
opinion.
Yeah, the Jalen Brunson thing is tough because, like you guys mentioned, it's off of a couple games. And it's not that he's not talented, but the dude's not an all-star player, and for him to earn that kind of money really sets a precedence in the market and really screws up the market. So now guys who are really good guards, really good players, but haven't made an all-star team, don't have that winning impact on the team as good as an all-star, but they're getting paid all-star money. Like that sets a bad example on the market because now teams are willing. They've okay that this is what Brunson got for this tier of a player. So now what that happens, and we discussed this last week, DJ, is teams are going to start overpaying even more for them to secure contracts for these players. And who are the teams that can do that? The big markets like the New York Knicks just did. So that sets a really bad standard or sets a really bad bar for the rest of the league because now when it comes to trying to when it comes to trying to re-sign your free agents and retain the players that you have for these small markets, when bigger teams are willing to say, all right, we'll just give you the max as possible. That sets some pretty bad example overall for the rest of the league. So yeah, I would say him and as much as I love the kid and what he did this year, Anthony Simons' extension is pretty crazy,
I was
but
gonna
it's
ask
not
you, what
as
do you guys
bad.
think of that?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say it's as bad only because of the fact that he's still young and he did have a breakout year, showed a lot of potential in the time without Damian Lillard on the floor. So I really like what I saw from him this year. So I'm gonna reserve my judgment a little bit on that, but it is a bit of an overpay. Um, but the thing that's crazy about this is because yeah, Brunson gets signed this huge deal. Now you're going to see players like CJ McCollum. You're going to see players like Fred Van Vliet. All of these guys be like, okay, this is the market for a non All Star player, but we're someone who has a better resume, et cetera, et cetera. And then the market is going to get all crap to shoot. It's going to get all fumbly. So I don't like where this is heading, and I feel like we're also heading into another lockout in the next CBA negotiations because of how much money is being spent. Again, there's still a huge advantage for big markets, and the whole supermax thing hasn't necessarily worked. Only for obviously, the star players who can make $250 million between 5 years, right? We've never seen money where guys are making $50 million a year like until now. So I think there's going to be a lot of changes coming in, and again, the Brunson deal is actually much bigger for a league standpoint and a cap space standpoint than just simply overpaying a guy who doesn't deserve that kind of money yet. But yeah, Brunson is a guy who doesn't deserve that kind of money yet. It's based off of a couple games. So, anyways, long-winded answer to say that was crazy because it was so good. The money was so good that Brunson just didn't even bother taking meetings from the Mavericks, and who is the third team? I can't remember. There's a third team, but anyways,
Yeah, but
yeah.
I mean, to sum it up, the phrase I thought of was, "He's a perfect Robin. But I don't know if he can really fill the shoes of Batman."
Mm,
I will say one thing: I'm drafting him in fantasy next year because I know he's going to play 40 minutes.
yeah.
But I think that, and for me personally, the silver lining is that I hope it gives Cam Reddish a really big opportunity. Because I mean, I think the sort of mold slash like formula when it comes to the fact that you do have a small lead guard is to surround him with a size. Saw that with Trae Young, where Herder has one of his backcourt plus, and Jalen Brunson, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson. I think I'm just like, but for me, I think one of the kind of worst signings, in my opinion, was Gary Harris at 2 years, 26 million. Now, there are kind of two reasons why. Number one is like he just wanted a big payday, but also why would you do that if you're the Magic when you have so much log jams. I mean, Cole Anthony, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, Markel Fultz, Paulo Banquero, Obamba's back, and then Wendell Carter Jr. Like, I think you know that you're not competing for anything, and as much as he could be the vet or whatever, he doesn't necessarily have that age gap that really I think induces that effect. Now, obviously, he's going to command a lot of respect considering that we're playing with a bunch of guys who just got out of high school in a sense. But yeah, I mean, get your bag. But Gary Harris was a guy I was expecting to like really help out a contending team. Like he was one of my trade target or like sign like free agency targets for the Bucks. But yeah, the other one was not necessarily an overpay, but like well, there's two here. Number one was DeAndre Jordan for the Nuggets. That makes no sense. I mean, I would much rather think you give a guy like Zeke Naji, who's shown some potential, because when it comes to being the backup center for the Nuggets, you're not going to play that many minutes. So I don't think it's necessarily like a position you really need to spend hard on. And the other one was Andre Drummond to the Bulls. Now, I think Andre Drummond can be a solid, he's a solid rebounding, like he's a solid backup center, but I think what the Bulls really needed was a guy who can help them defensively as well as be a backup. I think a guy that comes to mind is like Dwight Howard's still on the market. I mean, JaVale McGee, obviously, maybe 3 years, 20 million is a little much, but I think there were just a lot more, there were better options to be spent there rather than getting one man who's going to be remembered for the biggest example of a quote unquote dick riding, as well as dating Sam from iCarly. But yeah, those are like my two that I had to give
Yeah.
out. But heading from there now, obviously y'all know us by this point. I'm a Bucks fan. Ruben is obviously a Vancouver Grizzlies fan, or the other team from Canada, and then Christian is a Celtics fan by association, even though his heart's in the Bay. Mine's someone in the Bay because of my mom. But what? How would y'all? Okay, first of all, what do you guys think of the acquisitions your teams have made, and what would you kind of make the overall grade? So
Yeah, for Toronto, for me, I'd say it's an A, right? Because now here, let me phrase this correctly here. On everything they've done so far, and not what's rumored, the rumored stuff I'll talk about shortly. The stuff they've done, they went into the offseason saying we're going to worry about our free agents. They did. They re-signed Thaddeus Young and Chris Boucher. Chris Boucher was one of the best players off the bench last year by the analytics, and it showed. And Thaddeus Young, when he came in, was a huge veteran presence for that team. And obviously, on and off the court, you felt the impact of that signing, or sorry, of that trade, and then ultimately now the signing. And then them being able to use their a little bit of their, I want to say it's their TPE, where they signed Otto Porter for, I think it's almost 2 years, 12 million. I think that's the number if I'm not mistaken. But to sign a 3-and-D wing, a guy like Otto Porter, who's come back from injury and obviously rejuvenated his career with Golden State, and obviously was a huge impact player to them being able to win a championship and being able to be this successful. I think it was a huge, huge, huge deal. I love that for them because that shores up their bench. He's obviously a guy who can put the ball on the floor and score and facilitate, defend multiple positions. He's 6'9", so that he fits right into that mold that they're trying to build. So I'd give it an A because, again, they got the free agents that they wanted to worry about, and they signed someone who was quite frankly lurking in the shadows, but was a pretty big free agent or potential free agent this summer. When it comes to the rumored stuff regarding Kevin Durant, Toronto here clearly has jumped up the gun in terms of being able to acquire the guy. Now, all I have to say is you get Kevin Durant any any way possible, and you worry about the stuff later. The only thing that I hope doesn't happen is if that deal is made, that you manage to keep Pascal Siakam and Scotty Barnes, whatever the cost may be. Um, because at that point, without either of those two, I don't think you're either going to mortgage your future because you're going to send all these picks away. So you need to have Scotty Barnes on your franchise because at least you'll have him for 7 to 8 years, right? So if you're going to mortgage your next 4 years worth of draft picks, you need to be able to keep your star player who's going to eventually develop into that player, and or you need to keep Pascal Siakam because you need a second All Star, a guy who's already proven to have won a championship as 1B with 201A, right? So and Kevin Durant also has mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, that he is not really interested in playing on a team without one or two All Stars. So you maximize your ability in your window to win while also not mortgaging your future entirely when you keep a Scotty Barnes. So if they manage to get Kevin Durant without having to give up any of those two players, I'll be happy. And the fact that Toronto has been in the conversations for Kevin Durant is only a testament to how good their asset management has been from the very beginning, where they have all their picks, they have a ton of young players on really good contracts, um, and they have all the assets they need to make trades. And they also still have their full MLE, so they can actually still go to free agency and sign some bigger names and or use that money towards a sign and trade. I have to give Toronto an A right now based on what they've done so far, and also the fact that they are actively using their assets in a very progressive way.
Hope you're excited for Scotty and Malachi Flynn back. No, but I think the one thing I really commend the Raptors on, I think, is the Thaddeus Young 2 years, 16 million, right? But when I think of guys that Scotty Barnes reminds, Thaddeus Young is one of the first guys I think. Now, obviously, Scotty's like much further along in terms of like this point in their career, but the reason they call the man Thaddeus Johnson, yeah, I think that's probably one of my favorite moves, honestly, of like the entire offseason. Christian, what do you think about how the Celtics?
I mean, re-signing Luke Cornett is really a game changer. Having that third
That's the next
string
Larry
center
Bird.
is really going to do numbers for them next season. But no, I mean, I couldn't really be any happier with their free agency signings. I think they've poised themselves to pretty much compete even further next season. Like, I think it's scary to come up against Boston, regardless. Now that they have that championship contending experience, but to add like players like Malcolm Brogdon and Danilo Gallinari specifically, I think is so substantial. Only in the sense that with how they're kind of like I'm looking at the roster right now and how they have it made up in terms of like their depth chart. I think being able to slot in players like Malcolm Brogdon and Danilo Gallinari specifically, they're kind of like hybrid players that can play between one or two, or with Danilo Gallinari 3 or 4. I think that takes off a lot of stress off of players like Jason Tatum, like the Al Horford, Robert Williams situation. Um, kind of gives chances really for like more players and more of a like distinctive bench unit. And it's going to be scary, if you have a bench unit that's either led by, and I would assume that's led by like Malcolm Brogdon and like Derek White, right? And then with Danilo Gallinari on top of that, and then being able to like shuffle around the fours and the fives a little bit more. I think it's perfect. I mean, I don't really see as many flaws with this roster as I did prior to the free agency. So I think I'd have to give like honestly, given the way the signing went with Dino Gallinari, not really giving up too much, and same with the trade for Malcolm Brogdon. I I mean, this is kind of biased, but I think it's either an A or A plus like off season for them so far. It's pretty flawless. Like they've really given up nothing to add like two very strong players on their team.
Oh, I mean, obviously, a bit more in depth. Brad Stevens is a bad man. Bro. Uh, for the Bucks, I would give it like I think right now we're teetering below a B and C plus. Now, obviously, that doesn't sound as like optimistic and as good as like some of your guys as we're talking about your franchises, but the Bucks have had like a solid start. I mean, I think it all really started when Pat Connaughton opted into his player option. I mean, this dude had the opportunity to get paid. I talked about it last week, but that's kind of what set the precipice for potential offseason. I think the Bucks can, because I'll talk about it in a bit, but I don't think they're done making moves. I mean, re-signing Bobby, 4 years, 49 million. That man got his payday. Love to see it. I think undoubtedly Bobby's getting his jersey retired. What he's brought to this city, what he's meant to the organization of the Bucks is unquantifiable, even though it is in the tune of 49 million. And then also re-signing Javon Carter. You know, here, I'll say this. I love George Hill. I've loved George Hill since he was in his Indiana days. I'm sure Ruben loves George Hill because without him, Kawhi doesn't end up on Spurs. But trade that man, trade that man, please. Like I love him with my whole heart, but that man was getting absolutely cooked by the Celtics. And another guy that I think it really took away from was Javon Carter, because, my opinion, Javon Carter way up there when in regards to like perimeter defenders. I would really love him to be the like full time backup for this team. And yeah, the Joe Ingles move is cool. I like it. 45% from three that 1 year, and I think that's only gonna be not. I don't think he's gonna shoot better than that, but I think he's gonna be close to that. Considering that when you look at the players he's played with, he hasn't played with a player that has such gravitational pull as Giannis. And not only that, now they're gonna have to worry about Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Grayson Allen. There's way more threats from the 3 point, I think, than he's ever played with, or maybe not way more, but I think just guys that have such a gravitational pull in terms of like game planning and stuff like that. So I'm excited to see it. From what I've read, he won't play until like Christmas time though, so gives him more time to rest up, recover. As much as like those torn Achilles, the ACL or whatever, are like kind of whoa, I don't know how he's gonna come back kind of injuries. Joe Ingles Joe Ingles' game has never really predicated on the fact that he needs like to have crazy athleticism. One thing that I'm really excited for him is like how effective he is in the pick and roll, because with him and Rudy, whew, now you give him Giannis, whew. So I'm excited for that. And recently, I think either yesterday or today, we waived Ray John Tucker and Luca Villadoza. I think that just makes space for some new toys. I read an article before this about some guys we could get. Rudy Gay was on that. I would take it. But the one that was kind of really intriguing, that's like if all things went right in the world, was Jordan Clarkson. I think the trade was uh Grayson Allen, George Hill in 2 seconds. Now, I don't think that's like if everything were to go perfect kind of thing, but a man can dream. So I definitely don't think the Bucks are done making moves, especially based on like the two players they just waived. And yeah, right now it's at a B. I think, if my hunch is correct and John Horst is on the verge of making some more moves, definitely has room to improve on that. But alrighty, heading from here. Now, as we talked earlier, as much as there's a lot about like guys signing their new contracts, trades are still one of the most fine things. And we talked about it a little earlier. Now let's go a little more in depth. So, Rudy Gobert heading to Minnesota. They got the Twin Towers there, and the trade involved Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverly, Walker Kessler, who was like 24th, 27th pick this year, Jared Vanderbilt, Andrew Balmoro, and 4 first-round picks. Christian said this is an overpay. I extremely agree. Rudy's what 30, but I mean, he's getting paid $200 million by the end of the contract. He's 34, and I think what this has done for the Timberwolves is that it's kind of a little too much dip on the chip, in my opinion. I think they really had a good core of like not only just their big three, kind of in a sense, but that overall roster I think was constructed fairly well. Obviously, missing a few things here and there. A rim protecting center was like something I think that they could have looked into, but obviously they got the best guy with that. But I think what this has done is it's made it so that if they don't win a championship in the next 4 years, they're on the verge of being like slightly below the Nets fuck up. Obviously they're gonna have a guy like Anthony Edwards to like still like handle most of it. Carl, I think Towns got his bag. Elo, I think if he resigns on a more team friendly deal, still has the ability to be, one of those dudes. But yeah, I think about it, basically 5 first round picks for a guy who's 34 by the end of his contract. I'll say it like this: it's a lot like how Rudy's situation with the Jazz was. They could go 82-0 in the regular season. I don't think anybody really cares about that. What are you going to do in the playoffs when the lights are brightest? On Rudy's end, though, I'm excited to see what he plays like with the guard who will actually pass to him. I'll end off on that. What y'all think?
Yeah. Fuck, man. This is, in my opinion, one of the worst trades I've seen in a while. I like. I can't justify it because like this is a trade you would see for like a like marginally like game changing player. I'm not saying Rudy Gobert isn't exactly that, but he's not. You know, like you said, he is a 30-year-old center, and I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that he's practically the best defensive player in the league, in objectively. I mean, with his accolades and obviously his plus minuses, whatever else. But that is like there's two ends of basketball. There is offense and defense, and I have I've thought about it like time and time again every season. Like he does get his points like every game, but it's like how any center gets points. Like they just get fed the ball or they get second chance rebounds. It's not really like the type of offense that really moves teams. At least the way Rudy plays. I just don't think he's worth all of that, especially like with the players they gave up, like Patrick Beverly and Malik Beasley specifically. I feel, and even Jeremy Vanderbilt for sure. Now thinking about it, like those three players were pretty much like crucial to the playoff berth for Minnesota last year. And to really give up all of that, plus basically their future, just for this dude, is pretty egregious. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how else to word it or what else to say. I just think like it is a move that I can understand could work in some ways, and they still have like a very functional or more than functional starting five. I mean, adding Kyle Anderson into the unit, I assume he's gonna probably slide in, possibly into a starting role. Or I don't. Who else do they have? Jalen McDaniels plays the
I
four.
personally feel like Kyle's probably slated to be like sixth or seventh man. Because the way I see it, I think starting five will probably be exactly what they normally run. Sans Jared Vanderbilt, obviously. Elo as your point guard, obviously. Ant-Man at your two. Jalen McDaniels as your three slash primary wing defender. Cat's gonna be able to operate more like openly and not having to like time the paint as much, and Rudy's gonna.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, even given that, I don't know. There's so many players that can exploit Rudy Gobert in the league, in my opinion. I I wouldn't say he's overrated on defense. I think that would just get a lot of too much pot stirring going. But
I don't
I
think
do.
so. I think he is overrated
All
defensively.
right, someone had to say it. It
He
just
got
Well,
wasn't.
forty
he was played off
points.
the floor. He was played off the floor and during the playoffs. I mean, it's because he can't guard on the perimeter. And so when you play these teams that go small, it's impossible for him to defend because he doesn't have the foot speed. And especially if he's not surrounded by good perimeter defensive players, he's making up a lot of ground for a lot of these for his team, for his teammates. And so when you have a crappy defensive team surrounded by an anchor, most of the time the anchor is going to get exposed because the anchor is no longer down there. Right? It's just a simple thing. So I agree 100%, Christian. This trade I actually don't hate as much as most people are saying, only because of the fact this allows Cat to move to the four. And I think that allows Cat to play a more natural position where he can be more successful offensively and not have to worry about protecting the paint as much. So I think when you move him to the four, that's less of a burden on him defensively. You can hide him a little bit because that perimeter isn't as bad defensively. You lose Patrick Beverly, so he was your best guard defender. But I like the move simply because Cat can do pretty much has full reign offensively now to stay on the outside and not have to have that pressure to stay inside. Because obviously, if you do, you're going to crowd the paint. So this allows him to be more perimeter oriented, play a four out, one in system. So I like that. I like the trade that just simply for that. I would say though, I think Rudy Gobert can very much work with this team only because of the fact that, um, like Christian mentioned, he's got a guard that can pass him the ball in the pick and roll, and you have perimeter players the ability to hit shots, right? And when you're a big man like Cat, can hit those threes at a high clip and create offense for you off the dribble like he does. Um, that opens up the game for Rudy Gobert, right? Like when you have a lot of strong perimeter players that can create off the bounce and um, find their offense. Most of the time, the guy that has the most benefit is the guy off the dump off pass, where he's just sitting kind of there at the low block, and Gobert will be a beneficiary of that. And also expect him to get a lot of offensive rebounds on this team because Minnesota loves to shoot. If I'm not mistaken, they led the league in shot attempts this year, or maybe that was just in the playoffs. I might
I
be
feel
just
like
speaking out of my.
that makes sense based on the way they play.
Yeah, I mean, I have to like don't quote me on that. I'm probably like super wrong or either completely right. So, um, again, he's going to be in a beneficiary with a team surrounded by offensive talents, and you know, again, Cat's the biggest beneficiary of this too because now he can play his real game. Um, DG, I guess while you look at that, I'll just segue over unless you have any more words about Rudy Gobert.
So they were 10th in field goal attempts. Were they? They're like top 10 across for like field
Yeah,
goal attempts slash like 3 point attempts.
right. There you go. So yeah, that's all I have to say about it. I think there are going to be some positives to this, just as much as there are cons. So I think this is the biggest question mark going into the season. Obviously, considering if Durant gets traded or not, but that Gobert trade is you know a huge question mark.
I guess if okay, here's a little question. If you guys were to say when you look at the Jazz, who's the biggest, including like the players they traded for, who would you guys say is like the biggest beneficiary? Because I mean, for me, I think I had to give it to Jared Vanderbilt. I love that dude. The way he plays, the way like so gritty, does all the dirty work. He plays a lot bigger than he is. I think it's like 6'10", 220 or something like that. Plays a lot bigger than that. I think he is going to be able to really start to carve out a solid foundation that he already had. Yeah, I think that's the one player I'm really excited for when you look at like the Jazz's return.
I agree. uh, I mean, I think the other player that I could see, um, I think given that you know he is a center, Walker Kessler. I imagine
Yeah.
will slide into the starting position. I don't think. I mean, I don't think he's gonna have to fight a lot with Hassan Whiteside. Is what I'm saying. I mean, maybe they'll play rotational minutes to figure out, what it really looks like for the most part for them. But their depth chart is really weak in the center position, and a guy who is really young with an experience like two experienced guards. I mean, not even beyond Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell, but don't can't forget Jordan Clarkson, Patrick Beverly, even Nikhil Alexander Walker. They've all been in the league for a seasoned amount of time. He's gonna get a lot of PT and he's gonna get a lot of gonna get a lot of good looks. I assume. And so yeah, I'm hyped for him, but definitely Jared Vanderbilt. He's definitely like gonna. I think those two players will basically slide into a starting position automatically.
Yeah, I like the for me the biggest thing is the four first round picks, or is it five? I think it's the first
You
round
could
pick.
basically call it 5 since Walker hasn't signed his like deal yet.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, yeah. So Kessler, they've got a young piece. Jared Vanderbilt is obviously a good young piece in the four first round picks. That's a lot of assets that you can use in trades moving forward. And from my assumption, I believe Donovan Mitchell probably won out or is probably the next on the block to get traded. I mean, if they decide to keep him, because there's
I
no way I
heard
think.
they're trying to retool, but I'm still on the side of like he's probably getting moved.
Well, I think he'll want to move. I
That
don't know
too,
if he'll
yeah.
want to stick around in a retooling with Utah. I also don't think the pieces they have right now are going to help them retool or to help them stay competitive. They might as well use all those assets to trade Donovan Mitchell, get a number of picks back, and then also try to use that to obviously get to. And San Antonio's doing the exact same thing, right?
The
They're
Victor
trying to get all their eggs in the
Wembanyama's
basket.
the
Yeah,
sweepstakes. They want to get the
yeah.
next French guy.
You said it right there. So I mean, it's pretty simple. I think everyone's going that route. All these teams are trying to get that top pick. Um, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with all those assets. But I think there are positives for both teams in this trade.
No, we've all. Have you guys seen that video of Wembanyama fucking cooking the shit out of Rudy?
Yeah.
I'd tag too if I were them. But alrighty. I mean, the Brogdon trade, I think we can all agree pennies on the dollar. Is there anything?
Yep.
I don't think there weren't any other big trades, right? It's just, well, we're all kind of just waiting to see what happens with this KD thing. Well, let's talk about that. We'll keep it like this. Where do you guys think he is going?
Christian, you want to take a stab on that one?
I don't have any realistic answers. This is one of those situations in the NBA that is literally going to, I think, surprise us when it does happen. I could see the Raptors, and I mean, I've read the articles on it. The Raptors being kind of in top contention just for the matter of their assets. Um, yeah, so I get it. Like, I could really see them ending up there, but I don't know. It's really hard to say what like I don't know. Like, we were talking about it earlier with the Rudy Gobert trade and how the amount of things piled on just to get Rudy Gobert on that team. I mean, I don't know if Ruben would want to see that happen to his team. Like, we're talking yeah, maybe it's Fred VanVleet and yada yada yada, Gary Trent Jr. But it might have to be the whole damn roster for KD. Like like I don't know. I wouldn't want to see that happen to my team. So I don't really know. I I don't think I
Okay.
have an
Are they
answer.
gonna
I'd
be
love to see.
starting?
I'd love to see him pair up with Steph again.
Are they gonna be starting Malachi Flynn in the backcourt?
Gonna be starting
Oh,
Yuta Watanabe on the starting point.
hey, he's not even going to be on the team next year. Dude, I think Toronto's got the best assets to make any deal, right? If Brooklyn ultimately wants Scotty Barnes, it's the question that goes, okay, Masai, how far are you willing to go to get Kevin Durant on your team? Because let's say he does trade Scotty Barnes. he would have to package Ken Birch and Gary Trent Jr. and 4 first round picks in order for you to get Kevin Durant. Let's say you trade Scotty. Hypothetically, your starting lineup is Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Kevin Durant, Pascal Siakam, Precious Achiuwa. And that very similar lineup won a championship in 2019 when they had Kawhi Leonard. And then you still have those bench pieces that you re-signed, Otto Porter, who you brought in, and then those young players. So you can look at it that way. Or you can go the route and say, hey, all right, we'll give you 4 first round picks and 3 pick swaps, Gary Trent Jr. and OG Anunoby for Kevin Durant. And that trade also works out very well, and that was actually a proposed deal. Um, and for Brooklyn, obviously, they get the picks. They get a lot of draft compensation, and they get 2 young players who are under 25 years old who are on the come up. Right, OG Anunoby had a breakout year. Gary Trent both also had a breakout year. And if you're looking from a competitive standpoint, Brooklyn wants a trade so that they can stay competitive. So your starting lineup in any case would be Seth Curry. I'm not counting Kyrie right now because it seems like Kyrie's going to get moved. You've got Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Gary Trent, OG Anunoby, and the rest of that roster on there. So you're still building really good pieces. And so if you look at a trade between Toronto and Denver, sorry, Toronto, not Toronto and Denver. The reason I'm thinking is because I'm about to reference Denver. Toronto and Brooklyn. If that trade gets made, again, Masai Ujiri is one of the only GMs to have dealt multiple superstars and throughout his career. You go back to the time in Denver in 2009 or 2010, sorry, when they made that trade for Carmelo Anthony to go to New York. Look what happened. Denver became really good because he got a number of deep pieces that kind of fit that roster's culture. Andre Iguodala, who turned out to be an all-star player, and a number of other guys who were depth pieces. So this is very similar in that case. Masai Ujiri is willing to go, but he's going to be on the other end of that, right? Where he's going to be the one acquiring the superstar in return for a lot of good players. So do I see him being in Toronto? I see there's a pretty good chance that he does. I also see there's a pretty good chance for him to be with Phoenix, because Phoenix has the ability to make that trade too. Now, do they want to do a sign and trade with Ayton? From what I understand, Phoenix thinks Ayton is not nearly enough, as opposed to Ayton, Mikal Bridges, and a number of other picks. And I don't know if Phoenix is willing to go out there and gut that roster. Because if you do, then there's not much left, right? Unless you start, you could start Cam Johnson at that position at 3, have Kevin Durant, and then your center is, whoever you just resigned, freaking Bismack Biyombo. I don't know.
Dario Saric.
Yeah. So exactly. So I don't know. I think Toronto is in a better place positionally for their team to make this deal because they already have that top end talent that has already won a championship, and you plug in that player and it works. Mikal Bridges and Ayton are such a big part of their identity in Phoenix that if you lose those pieces, you're stuck with the big 3 with not a whole lot left. So, I mean, that's just food for thought. But yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go out super biased and say, hey, I think he's gonna line with the Raptors, and I would love to see it. So I'm just gonna manifest that energy right now.
Ruben just had his Brian Windhorst moment there.
I did, man. I feel pretty good about it too.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think it's between Toronto or Phoenix. I think Miami was seeming feasible, but the fact he wants Kyle, Jimmy, and Bam all on the roster, like, yeah. But I think it's between those two. One thing I will say, I really fucking hope Kyrie and Russell Westbrook don't get traded for one another. That'd be like, they need to like give them every possible fine for tampering, because I mean, there's no world where those two guys get traded for each other.
Yeah,
Man, that's a lot of time. Keep looking like that's what's gonna happen. The GM at it again, man. Exactly.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know if you can. I don't. This is the thing that I hate about big markets too, is you can have the crappiest season the worst picks and trades and worst team management like you did with Rob Pelinka this year. And because you're a big market, you still get rewarded. Right? And imagine guys, what if Kyrie actually opted out and decided to say, I'm gonna sign the full MLE with the Lakers for $6.4 million for 1 year. Imagine how freaking pissed all the team owners and all the GMs and team presidents would be if Kyrie just decided to say, "All right, you know what? I'm a forget the 42 million that I have guaranteed. I'm going to opt out and sign with a championship team." And that the fact that these teams are getting rewarded even though they had a terrible season and even though their front office is basically stupid. So, I mean, again, that's just more food for thought because it seems like we're going in that direction again, where the big markets once again continue to dominate the what the league is looking like moving forward.
100%. Definitely agree with. Do you guys agree with this though? The Brooklyn experiment. Kyrie, James Harden, KD. Biggest disappointment of all time?
I think it's fair. I mean, there's been like a few LA experiments that could be, argued to be up there too, but these are three
2004.
2004, yep. And I don't know what year it was with, the Dwight Howard and Steve Nash
2012, I
move.
think.
2012, yeah, 2012 with Steve Nash and Dwight.
Yeah. Um,
I was less surprised about that one. I actually
yeah,
called it at
yeah.
the beginning of that year,
That
saying
one
I
made
think,
that one made more sense. But this
yeah,
this one is like, I think, like really bad in the sense where these players really have no excuse to like not clinch not only a playoff berth, but like I would say an Eastern Conference Finals berth
they
easily.
never made one. That's crazy, you
Yeah,
know.
that's pretty fucked. Like these are three of the best scorers to ever like touch a basketball at a considerable time in their career too. It's not like the Celtics with Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Kevin Garnett who are at the twilight of their careers, like years out. These are three players that could pretty much change a team still,
Yeah,
and they didn't do shit. So I think it is probably the biggest upset of all time.
100%. One man to beat
uh,
them.
sorry, I was just gonna say, like, agreed fully with Christian. That's all I pretty much had to say. I, it was a huge disappointment. I don't know how you biff that up, but I can't. The one thing I would add is not all of this falls on Sean Marks because he made the right decision at the end of the day, bringing in 3-star talents. You bring them in, and it showed when they're healthy and when they're all available to play, they're freaking good. But that was never the case. And so it just didn't work. So you took the chance, you lose out. But the beauty of it is Kevin Durant will trading Kevin Durant and trading Kyrie Irving will get you a number of assets back. So regardless, it looks like they're going to get young players, good players back. They're going to get draft compensation back to make up for the draft compensation they lost in the Philly trade, or sorry, in the Houston trade to get James Harden. So I think everything will work out eventually for them because at the end of the day, you always have to get the star player and you make those decisions like team chemistry. Are they going to fit? What does their future look like? Injuries, all that stuff you can worry about later. Because again, this is another example that you got the best player, didn't last, wants out, but you can still trade him for really valuable assets that'll help your franchise now and moving forward.
That's a good way of looking at it. I think that's what, for me, I think it is the biggest kind of failure. But I think that's when you look at those moments as immediate pieces and you don't really look into the future as much as, well, obviously, with the first Brooklyn thing, that makes sense. And with this one, yeah, I agree. As shitty as it is to like not really see what this trio was capable of, there's no doubt. If fully healthy, everything goes according to plan, they're sitting on a few chips.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
now, hey, We might be back in like what was the year that was what 2019 where they had the really fun roster? Was that 2018?
Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Was
yeah.
it? Yeah.
might be
With
that time again.
D'Lo and Karis
D'Lo, Karis
LeVert, Jared
LeVert,
Allen.
yeah,
Fun team. Spencer Dinwiddie.
and it was a good team too. So
Yeah.
hey, it's shitty to see in regards to like just seeing the potential of it, but shit, onto the Kupo. Eat those. Anyways, we're coming down to like the little tail end of this episode, and let's end it off with this. Who would you guys say? I don't think necessarily. Okay, I'm gonna say the best, but you know, kind of if one person takes your answer, maybe try to think of another one kind of thing. Just because I think it's you know undoubtedly NBA finalist didn't win.
Hmm.
That's
Top teams that are winning the offseason right now.
yeah.
I mean, wow. Honestly, I gotta say Boston because you got Malcolm Brogdon for absolutely nothing, and that they addressed a need that they needed. When I'm talking about need, we were talking about bro, they were gonna live or die by this, and they got Malcolm Brogdon, a pure point guard, a conventional point guard in a sense, because he's not a guy that scores the ball a whole lot. He's more pass first, but can defend multiple positions. He fits the prototypical NBA with his size at 6'3", 6'4". Um, Great. They got him for nothing, dude. Like how you got one of the top guards in the league, a top, a tier guard, and you got him. So I mean, I think them, and probably have to say Detroit. Detroit is actually having a really good offseason just based off their draft. Um, Drafted super well, made really good decisions throughout that evening. Now they've got a really nice core moving forward.
Solid answer. For me, low key, I think Sacramento's having a low key, pretty solid offseason. Keegan Murray, obviously with the fourth pick. I don't know if y'all have been watching Summer League. Dude's killing. Uh, Kevin Herter is in a fresh new situation. Gonna be able to play with. We'll see what Deer. I'm excited to see him play. Nice long wing. There's a lot of length there from like due to your forward position with the Kings, which is really nice. I think Malik Monk again has a chance to really yes, super nice spark plug. A la not necessarily that he's on that level, but you think of like the greatest spark plug time, Crawford, Williams. Not saying he's on any of those guys' levels, but the kind of narrative that I think is shaping is on that horizon. I want, as well as Davion Mitchell had another one is OKC. I watched their summer league game this today. I'm not like overreacting. I'm gonna overreact. I think they're gonna be able to run a bunch of nice lineups. You have a guy who's under 6'3", 6'4", and cooked. I mean, Jay is 6'5". Uzmang Jiang 6'9". And then Williams 6'6" with a 7-foot wing. When the Slim Towers, Poku and Chet, and like I will admit, Chet still looks skinny as fuck, but I think what he brought offensively, as well as his patience on the defensive end, I think is going to be a really big asset to not only just the Thunder having a solid future, but also the fact that they have multiple guys who are able to kind of run. I saw a position today where Tech caught the or got the block, took it coast to coast, and handed it off for like to a guy for an and one. I think it was Jalen Williams, Josh Giddey. Those two look like they had some crazy chemistry. Points 11. Jay's cooking in like, or no, like the qualifiers for the World Cup right now. It's crazy. I mean, it's a nice time to be a Thunder fan. I'm not saying it's like shades of another one of the not necessarily terrible like another big what if. But I think they're on the precipice of kind of getting back towards that sort of reputation. And if you want to expand on the Celtics, I got another team in mind. End us off, bro.
Sorry, the question is, do you mind rephrasing the question?
So when I say who's having like the best slash solid off season, it's not necessarily just like who they've signed. You can encompass it all. Free agency, trades, draft, whatever.
Okay, yeah. I think the reason I say this is because their overall may drop next season in terms of standings, but I do think Utah, for what they got out of Rudy Gobert, has really set them up for a good future. They have been in like playoff poverty for like what feels like a million years. Um, and I think if they do want to retool around Donovan Mitchell, they'll inevitably make moves. But I think they've pretty much built enough assets up now to make those moves. And I'm really excited to see a prime Donovan Mitchell play with another star that is actually competent uh, on both sides of the ball. Personally, um, and that being said, I think like other than that, I do think the Lakers have made some decent moves for what little they have.
Yeah.
It's pretty worth mentioning. Like JTA or Juan Toscano Anderson, like really had a good stint with the Warriors. I think mid-season, and he just fell out of the rotation due to
And
really
he was
how
just
heavy the rotation was.
yeah, I think he was just a product of too much depth.
Yeah,
He could hoop.
exactly. He really could hoop, and it was unfortunate because I was like pretty high on him coming into the season, but I kind of understand that the Warriors are completely a win now team, and he fell off the depth chart. But regardless, yeah, for him to end up on the Lakers, it's good for the Lakers. Definitely good to have young players. Lonnie Walker, I think, is an absolutely absolute stealable player. Like, um, I would think that if the Spurs were trying to rebuild their team, that he would have been retained, but they got him, which is dope. And they picked up players like Damian Jones. Not necessarily players to move the needle, but at least they're not gonna have to pull from the G League as much this year, if at all. So yeah, I think those are the two teams for me that I think kind of stood out, at least with this specific kind of question.
I think just to piggyback a bit, I think the guy they drafted, Max Chris, baller. Comes from that Michigan State, so he knows how to play ball properly. And then even looking at summer league starts, so he hasn't shot it particularly well, but what he does have is just kind of that tenacity and that mode that rebounds. He has the ability to put the ball in the hole at will. I think just the length he possesses and just his overall build is so much. It's made for the modern NBA. Playing alongside like LeBron, it's nice to see.
Agreed.
Future's son is killing it too. Shout out to Scottie Pippen Jr.
Right. But he made it. And Sharif. Shout out Sharif.
He like it. He really does. No, but yeah. Ruben, you got anything left to say, bro?
Solid, other than I'm a champion.
Fact. I
No,
respect
just
that.
kidding. I'm just kidding. No, this off season has been solid. I'm just so excited to see where Kevin Durant goes, and the rest of the moves around the league are probably going to follow shortly after that. So that'll be a fun thing to watch as it unfolds.
100%. Not only that, on Thursday, we got Paulo and Jabari Smith going head to head in the summer league. So, with that being said, the bulk of free agency is kind of winding down, but if you aren't, you should be watching Summer League. We're gonna see some of the NBA's next guys up really start to hoop. There's gonna be, you guys ever seen that European dude from I don't know where he's from, but he always plays for the Magic summer team? Got like the crazy hair and shit like that.
Oh yeah, that
Yeah,
dude. Yeah.
that dude's gonna. I'm
The
assuming he's
the
gonna be
my
there.
player.
Yeah, the my player. But it's gonna be nice to see. I mean, all right. Last little question, quick, just fire off. You don't have to explain or anything. Who are you guys most excited to watch in?
At Holmgren. You already
Uh,
saw it.
Probably Paulo Ventura. I think his game is elite.
Hmm.
I mean, it doesn't really matter because I mean he's gonna be in. He's. I personally think he's playing for a poverty franchise, but you know
You think the cycle's
that
gonna continue? He's gonna be a Laker.
he. Okay. Anyways, that I don't know.
Yeah, those are all solid picks. For me, Jaden Hardy. I fucking love Jaden Hardy. I'm excited to see Hoop. I think not obviously not just through the summer league, but overall, I think that's another thing that's a silver lining with the Jalen Brunson say just end off there. I think Jaden Hardy is gonna have a chance to really hoop, especially long. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you're this far, I'm assuming you've enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, comment, whatever, all of that good stuff. But with that being said, stay safe, stay blessed. We'll see y'all soon.